Give me 45 seconds and I'll show you how buying businesses is the best way for you to be.
Now, there's another aspect of the problem, and that is that a great deal of our negative attitude to the experience of pain, and acute physical pain I'm speaking of now, is connected with a certain culturally conditioned unwillingness to react to pain in the natural way. In other words, we are afraid of giving in to suffering in the way that our own physical organism suggests to us. We are afraid of crying. We are afraid of screaming. We're afraid of going into those very undignified motions which constitute the human being's reaction in pain. Even though, as I just pointed out, we sometimes have the very same reactions in acute pleasure. But we are fundamentally ashamed of pain because we are taught that giving in to pain, weeping or something like that, is unmanly, sissy, or something like that. Now, it's a very dangerous doctrine that a human being should always be rigid in conditions of suffering. I often like to quote a passage from that Chinese philosopher, Lao Tzu, Lao-Tzu, which says, "Man at his birth is supple and tender. In death he is rigid and hard. Plants, when they are young, are pliant and soft, but when dead, they are brittle and dry. Thus, tenderness and softness are the companions of life, but rigidity and hardness are the companions of death." In other words, there is strength in weakness. Consider a cat. When a cat drops off a tree, what does the cat do? Does it go rigid? Does it say, "I'm going to be a real tough guy and meet the ground without flinching"? Does the cat stick out its feet like this? No. Because if it did, when it hit the ground, it'd be just a broken bag of bones. When the cat's in midair, it relaxes. It goes with it. It becomes weak. And so it hits the ground with a soft, heavy thud and is unharmed. Simple. And although you strike at it as hard as you like, you can never create a wound. So it is, you see, because of its softness that the water triumphs over the hardness. So then it's the same with human beings. Unfortunately, we are so brought up to mistrust our natural feeling reactions to certain experiences. We are conditioned to believe that we will suffer less, that we will somehow triumph over pain if we hold our feelings rigid. But you know, our reactions to pain are, in a way, therapeutic. They're healing, just like fever. When we have poisons in our blood, the natural defense mechanisms of the body send up our temperature and in this way boil out the invading bugs. Now, it used to be thought that when people had fevers, this was the disease. The fever itself was the disease. And so, once upon a time, doctors used to give medicine to take away the fever. But by taking away the fever, they very often killed the patient, because they took away the defensive action of the body to drive out the disease. And so in just the same way, if one refuses to react in the way of nature to invasions of pain, so too one may shatter the body beyond what it can stand. It's the same thing, you know. No bridge will stand up unless it has give. If a steel suspension bridge is built so firmly that it doesn't sway in the wind, that bridge will come crashing down on the first gale. It's just because there's give in it that the bridge is strong. Take a great building like the Empire State. The Empire State also has a sway in it. And if it didn't have that sway, it would be a very insecure structure indeed. So then, when we are willing to react to pain as our own natural feeling suggests, if we're willing to scream, if we're willing to weep, if we're willing to wriggle and writhe as pain suggests to us to do, a very strange thing happens. The very willingness to react in that way often makes it quite unnecessary to do so. Now, you may say I'm just talking big, and the only way I can prove what I say is the next time you have a toothache, the next time you have any serious pain, see what happens if you do this. If you, as it were, go along with the pain and don't try to fight it, yield, become weak, and you will discover the strength of weakness. So then you see, this is not really an escapist philosophy at all. It is most definitely a philosophy of keeping in mind the actual reality of the situation in which you find yourself. I don't know what could be more realistic than this, what could be more fundamentally facing the hard facts of life. One keeps his attention on the actual concrete fact that is happening as distinct from our socially conditioned and inculcated ideas and attitudes about it. And this is really facing reality 100%. And so, there come out of this two basic results. The first is that when we don't resist pain, we don't set up a vicious circle in connection with it. Take the pain of fear again. Supposing you're in a situation where the doctor has told you you have to have an operation. And of course, if you're going to undergo this operation in the best way, you need to be rested, you need to have plenty of sleep, you need to be strong, and so on. Well, fine advice, isn't it? Because the moment you know you've got to have an operation, you're liable to get a bit frightened, and then you know you ought not to be frightened. You ought not to stay awake at nights and worry about it. You need sleep. Then you get afraid, you see, because you're afraid. You're afraid that your fear is going to lead to insomnia and debility, and so you're afraid of being afraid. And then because you see that you are afraid of being afraid, you are afraid because you are afraid because you are afraid. So that worry is always a vicious circle in which you are worrying because you worry, because you worry, because you worry. And this, as it were, builds up a whole chain of reactions which makes the pain of fear worse and worse and worse. So then, if at any point in this link we can, as it were, be willing to be worried, and then you don't worry about being worried. Be willing to be afraid, then you don't have to be afraid of being afraid. And so this, in other words, diminishes the total amount of pain because it doesn't allow the painful situation to build itself up and up and up and up. In the same way, if somebody stuck a hook into you and you pull away from it, well, the hook goes more deeply into you. But if you're caught like a fish on a hook and you go with the hook, this reduces the amount of tension. And this works backwards all the way. The way down the line. Now there's also a second result. And that is that when our mind, our consciousness, our attention is fully focused on what is, on the actual situation, as I said, we are free from various thoughts about it and associations with it that bring up a context which makes the experience painful. So you might say that this is an attitude of taking things as they come, one at a time. For example, many of you who are not blessed with dishwashers have to wash many dishes day after day. And when you've been married as a woman for, 10 or 11 years, one day you're sitting there at the sink, utterly weary of the whole thing. And in your mind's eye comes the immense pile of dishes which you've had to wash day after day in the past. There they are in your mind's eye, standing up, piled forever and ever on the draining board. And also in your mind's eye is that enormous pile of dishes that you're going to have to wash in the future. You think my life is that of a mere drudge, washing dishes, washing dishes, washing dishes, and there's no end to it. But if you were realistic, you would see this. You have only one dish to wash in your life, this one. You can only wash one dish at a time, and that's the only one you have to deal with. It's the same with climbing a mountain. If you start to think as you climb, oh, what a lot of steps to take, then the task becomes utterly oppressive. Or if, for example, you make a New Year's resolution, and you say, well, I'm going to go on the wagon. I'm not going to drink anymore this new year. And if you say, this whole year I will not touch another drop of drink, well, of course, the old devil immediately brings to your mind 365 days of not drinking anything alcoholic. And that's overwhelming. Don't tempt the devil that way. One conquers the problem by not drinking this one and saying nothing about the next. So with the climbing of the mountain, taking each step as if it were the only step to be taken. And so, in the situation then, where there is the experience of agony, whether it be physical or whether it be moral, the way out is, in a way, suffering that agony as if this were the only thing in the whole world to be done. By going right down to the bottom of the furnace, no further pains will harass you. It was also so, isn't it, in Dante's Divine Comedy, when Dante and Virgil find their way out of hell by going down to the very center of hell. I like to illustrate this with another of those Zen stories. There was a monk who got news that his mother had died and he was weeping. And another Buddhist monk said to him, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You, a monk, still showing worldly attachments by weeping. He said, don't be silly. I'm weeping because I want to weep.
Nothing's more important than a great customer experience.
然后就打算来吃这样子。今天早上在洛基山脉吃了太多饼，然后导致现在头有点痛，头也有。我播影片，然后就打算来吃这样子。今天早上听说这个挑战起司这样的多，然后看起来非常的好吃，因为我看了某部影片，然后就打算来吃这样子。今天早上在洛基山脉吃了太多饼，然后导致现在头有点痛，头也有点痛。感觉是感冒了，希望挑战可以成功了。那我们话不多说，赶快继续吃吧，走。Do you mind if I ask some questions about the food challenge?
Go ahead.
So, like, how many people have attempted this challenge?
Can I show you?
Yeah, sure.
I have pictures of everybody.
Okay.
Everybody that's finished?
Yeah?
Everybody that
Failed. Okay.
you recognize that guy? He took second in Nathan's hot dog. Those are professional eaters.
Yeah, I only do videos about YouTube, so yeah, really professional. 这边是有成功的，看起来大概有10几位，然后这边是挑战失败的，还蛮多的，希望等一下可以成功。
So you can walk around the table.
Yeah. 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes.
So you can walk around the table.
Yeah. 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes.
No time limit.
No, not okay. Okay.
No time limit.
餐点上桌，这个总共有超级多片的 cheese 跟厚片的三明治，然后还有很多的薯条跟小块的 cheese 球。目前挑战最快完成是6分多钟，然后希望我可以打破他的记录啦。这个挑战它没有时间限制，那成功的话他会送你一件 T 恤跟10块的抵用券。好，那我们不要多说，赶快给它吃下去吧。Okay, I'm ready. Sorry about that. It's hard to beat it. 我也刚刚吃完了，然后因为我刚刚原本是想要挑战目前这里吃最快的，大概花了6分多钟，然后我自己大概花了大概7分半吧。最后真的是比较难，因为面包跟那个薯球真的是还蛮干的。对，尽力了啦，餐点免费，很开心。那等一下应该老板会送我他们的 T 恤，因为他们的衣服刚好缺货，所以店长让我随便选，然后我就选了一件我觉得比较好看的。
Thank you.
拿到了他们的胜利金。OK， 刚挑战完了，哇，吃的其实我觉得没有到非常困难啊，因为他一上桌的时候我就觉得说这应该吃得完，我就想说要挑战一下目前就是有一个参加热狗比赛第2名，他吃大概6分钟，结果很可惜没有突破他的记录，但是老板非常的好，他送了我们一件 T 恤跟10 块的美金，很开心能够成功。如果喜欢美国走岸系列的，记得点赞跟订阅，不给他起回。那我们就下次再见，拜拜。好，今天来到位于科罗拉多的雪山餐馆，然后要来吃一下他们的雪。然后夏天呢，我最喜欢吃的东西就是剉丁。那刚好这里有无限的剉丁可以吃。好。我觉得这要加一点黑糖，会比较好吃。但它的口感呢是非常的绵密哦，真的还不错吃哎。推荐大家如果来这里，记得一定要来吃一下这里的剉丁，我觉得非常的好吃，而且又不用钱。好吃。
See that the stars and planets move with perfect precision, each one keeping its own place in time and space. You can see that the seasons of the year come and go with perfect regularity. You can see an oak tree grows from an acorn, and a pine tree grows from the seed of its ancestor. An acorn never produces a pine, and a pine seed never produces an oak. These are simple things which anyone can understand. What one cannot see is the universal law through which nature maintains perfect balance throughout the myriad of universes. The world caught a fragmentary glimpse of this great universal law when Newton discovered that it holds your Earth in its position and causes all material objects to be attracted toward the center of the Earth. He called the law gravitation. As I said, there is a universal form of energy which nature keeps perfectly attracted toward the center of the Earth. He called the law gravitation. As I said, there is a universal form of energy which nature keeps a perfect balance between all matter and energy. She makes specialized use of this universal building material by breaking it up into different wavelengths. The breaking up process is carried on through habit. You will better understand what I'm trying to convey if I compare it with the method by which one learns to play music. At first, the notes are memorized in the mind. Then they are related to one another through melody and rhythm. By repetition, the melody and rhythm become fixed in the mind. Observe how relentlessly the musician must repeat a tune before he masters it. Through repetition, the musical notes blend, and then you have music. Any impulse of thought that the mind repeats over and over through habit forms an organized rhythm. Undesirable habits can be broken. They must be broken before they assume the proportions of rhythm. Are you following me? Rhythm is the last stage of habit. Any thought or physical movement which is repeated over and over through the principle of habit finally reaches the proportion of rhythm. Then the habit cannot be broken because nature takes it over and makes it permanent. It's something like a whirlpool in water. An object may keep floating indefinitely unless it is caught in a whirlpool. Then it is carried round and round, but it cannot escape. The energy with which people think may be compared with water in a river. People who give over their minds to fear, any sort of fear, neglect to use their minds and begin to drift. Eventually they drift into the whirlpool of hypnotic rhythm from which they may never escape. You may know that no one can be hypnotized by another person without his willingness to be hypnotized. The willingness may assume the form of indifference toward life generally, lack of ambition, fear, lack of definiteness of purpose, and many other forms. Nature does not need one's consent in order to place him under the spell of hypnotic rhythm. It needs only to find him off guard through any form of neglect to use his own mind. Remember this, whatever you have, you use it or lose it. All successful attempts to break the habit of drifting must be done before nature makes the habit permanent through hypnotic rhythm. Nature uses hypnotic rhythm to make one's dominating thoughts and one's thought habits permanent. That is why poverty is disease. Nature makes it so by fixing permanently the thought habits of all who accept poverty as an unavoidable circumstance. Through this same law of hypnotic rhythm, nature will fixing permanently the thought habits of all who accept poverty as an unavoidable circumstance. Through this same law of hypnotic rhythm, nature will also fix permanently positive thoughts of opulence and prosperity. Perhaps you will better understand the working principle of hypnotic rhythm if I tell you its nature is to fix permanently all habits, whether they are mental or physical. If your mind fears poverty, your mind will attract poverty. If your mind demands opulence and expects it, your mind will attract the physical and financial equivalents of opulence. This is in accordance with an immutable law of nature. All deeds follow thoughts. There can be no deeds without their having first been patterned in thought. Moreover, all thoughts have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical counterpart. One's dominating thoughts, that is, the thoughts one mixes with emotions, desire, hope, faith, fear, hate, greed, enthusiasm, not only have a tendency to clothe themselves in their physical equivalent, but they are bound to do so. No one is smart enough to dodge the influence of hypnotic rhythm. One could just as easily avoid the influence of the law of gravity. The law of hypnotic rhythm fixes permanently the dominating thoughts of men, whether they be drifters or non-drifters. There is a non-drifter would want to avoid the influence of hypnotic rhythm because that law is favorable to him. It helps him convert his dominating aims, plans, and purposes into their physical replicas. It fixes his habits of thought and makes them permanent. Only the drifter would wish to dodge the influence of hypnotic rhythm.
Give me 45 seconds and I'll show you how buying businesses is the best way for you to build your wealth and live a life of freedom. It's much better than all the internet market.
The year is 3855. A 17-year-old girl named Alexa and her younger brother Asher are at a museum of history and technology. In one of the museum's display rooms, there is a collection of ancient computers, laptops, tablets, smartphones, and other early smart devices, a few of which have been maintained and restored in order to still function. Specifically, one laptop on display is set up for visitors to use. On it, there are old digital tools used for things like information storage, digital art creation, communication, and personal upkeep, as well as browser applications used to access early forms of the internet. As part of the experience, the laptop has a sequence of default archival web pages that pertain to the exhibit, which is about early-stage digital content creation and internet communication. Alexa and Asher play around on the laptop for a little while their parents participate in another exhibit. While scrolling through the internet pages, they come across a web page of a video sharing platform with the video titled Internet Video of an Animated Voiceover. The description of the video reads, "This video is an excerpt from what is believed to be an interview, speech, podcast, or self-produced video essay created between the late 20th and early 22nd century. It simply serves as a sample for how individuals sought to use the internet to communicate during its early stages of development and integration. The source of the video is unknown due to digital dissemination, false attributions, synthetic media replications, and possible intentional anonymity." Alexa clicks play and the video starts.
One last question. When it's all said and done, how would you like to be remembered?
It's sort of a funny question, isn't it? Asking how you want to be remembered after you're gone. No one ever knows how they're remembered, nor does anyone ever experience it. And yet, for some reason, we still ask ourselves these sorts of questions. It's a paradox, really, to want something after I'm dead, but only be able to want anything while I'm alive. The question is really more about what I want to imagine while I'm alive then, isn't it? What I want to convince myself my life could be for beyond my own life, seeing as how I can only imagine beyond my own life while my own life still exists. If I were to humor the question though, I don't think I would want to claim any sort of banal, grandiose answers. I don't think I would want to say that I want to be remembered as significant or influential or smart or famous or wealthy or powerful or successful, or that I changed the world in some way. All of that would suggest that I can know what any of that even means in the bigger picture. In truth, I don't know what it means to be influential in a world that lacks clear direction. I don't know what it means to be wealthy in a world filled with poverty. I don't know what it means to be powerful in a universe that trumps everyone and everything. And I don't know what it means to be smart or successful or to change the world as a member of a species that's restricted from understanding what anything might really mean or cause. I suppose I'm attracted to these things as much as the next person, but I cannot say with certain honesty that I believe that in the end, any of these things are worth being remembered for. I guess the next answer would be that I want to be remembered as someone who tried their best to care, to help, to love, to be okay, to err on the side of sympathy and compassion as best I could, to be a good friend, good son, father, and husband, someone who lived honestly with both conviction and a willingness to adapt in what they think and believe, someone who contributed towards something they enjoyed and believed in simply because they could. I'm not entirely sure how good I was at any of these things, though, and I know that this answer might sound equally cliche, but if anything is an answer to how I want to be remembered, I think it's that. But the truth is, history is coded with innumerable amounts of people who lived with these qualities, and mostly none of them are remembered by anyone at all. Perhaps being remembered isn't all that important then, if most people aren't remembered for what's important. Of course, some people are remembered long after they're gone for things that do currently seem important or useful. But even then, if one is remembered because they've done something that's considered useful, isn't it the useful thing that is truly being remembered, and not the person in and of themselves? I mean, how does anyone know Albert Einstein if not in terms of scientific contribution? It's not as if the world likes Einstein inherently. The world likes his contributions, or him solely because of his contributions. Any exploration of his character and life is always contextualized or confined within the borders of science genius. In the eyes of history, Einstein would be no one if it were not for his scientific contributions. But of course, Einstein was not no one, regardless of his contributions. His contributions deserve celebration, of course, and so does he. But does our celebration of him now change anything for him then? I don't know if Einstein was happy, or if he wanted to be remembered in some grand way, or if he just wanted to understand more than what was understood at the time. But isn't it possible that his contributions are a byproduct of his experience of life, and not the source? And isn't it possible that this is the case for all people that are remembered as great throughout history? I'll certainly admit that there's some longing inside me to be remembered or thought of long after I'm gone. I believe it probably comes from the same place that yearns to live forever and lose nothing. But nothing lives forever, and everyone loses everything. To live for or care about being remembered is like planning your own birthday party on a day that you can't go. If I want to celebrate my life, I can only do it now while I'm still here. I believe everyone should still dedicate themselves to the something or some things that they want to be remembered for, be it a cause, a passion, a good heart, or all of the above. But not because it's something that they'll be remembered for, but because it's what they want to imagine their life is for. And what you imagine your life is for is what your life is for, isn't it? Whether one is remembered for it for 500,000 years or 5 minutes after they're gone, makes no difference to the person who lived for it. Ultimately, I have no illusions that I will last beyond the minds of a couple generations after me, at best. And so, what I do now, what I dedicate myself to, what I experience behind the eyes of my own self, must be enough. If it isn't, nothing is. The video fades to its end and the screen prompts an arrow pointing to the right with text that reads, "Next page." Before clicking, Asher says, "Well, that's 5 minutes we'll never get back." He pauses and then says, "And who's Einstein?" "Yeah, I don't know," Alexa replies. "I think he must have been a scientist or something. I think I've heard his name before. That's what it said, at least." Asher murmurs. "All right, well, do you want to go check out something else now?" Asher concludes. Alexa agrees, and they walk away from the laptop and onto the next exhibit of a different time in history.
You've got a great idea for an app, and you can't believe that no one else has thought of it yet. You're sure this idea would sell like crazy, except you don't know where to start.
Voice. It means you yearn for in the world, but you're at this very moment, you could be doing anything else in the world, but you're right here, looking at your screen and listening to my voice. It means you yearn for something, What if I told you that you can change everything that's happening in your life right now? Before April 1954, it was believed that no one could run a mile in less than 4 minutes. People had tried to do it repeatedly for over 1,000 years, and yet it failed. It was considered impossible. The human body was simply not capable of a 4-minute mile. It was called the 4-minute barrier. And then in Oxford, on the 6th of May, Roger Bannister came along and he ran a mile in 3 minutes, 59.4 seconds. Interestingly, Bannister was not a pro athlete. He attained this record with minimal training while practicing as a junior doctor. But as part of his training, he relentlessly visualized the achievement in order to create a sense of certainty in his mind and body. He thought and pondered on his success daily. Now, here's what's significant about that event. From then on, the 4-minute barrier has since been broken by over 1,400 athletes, including high schoolers. The record set by Bannister only lasted 46 days before being broken by John Landy in Finland. What happened? What made what seemed impossible now possible to many? Here's what changed. When he crashed through the barrier, the rest of the world saw that it was possible. And the previous myth was only a mental barrier. It was the mind that set the limitation, and not the body. It took Bannister a sense of extreme belief, extreme thought in his mind to remind himself that it was possible. And when he reminded himself that it was possible, his subconscious just had to agree with him, pushing his body to create the effect of his manifestation. He alone created that certainty in his mind without seeing any proof that it was possible. From then onwards, when other athletes got on the track, they knew it had been done. Holding that thought in mind made them go on to break the barrier and break his record. They thought about it into reality. Mind power is one of the most influential and most useful powers you possess. This power consists of your thoughts. The thoughts that pass through your mind are responsible for everything that happens in your life. Your predominant thoughts influence your behavior and attitude and control your actions and reactions. Some call it the law of attraction, while science calls it the reticular articulating system. This law of attraction uses the power of the mind to translate whatever is in our thoughts and materialize them into reality. The results of positive thoughts are always positive consequences. The same holds true for negative thoughts, always leading to bad outcomes. When it comes to science, we have a system in our body called the reticular articulating system, RAS. This system helps our brains decide what information to focus on and the ones to disregard. When your purpose is clearly defined and you have a mission, you live every single moment with certainty that you will achieve it and influence that you cannot bring filters into the subconscious. Positive information. The consequence of this is that you begin to pay attention to the things that help you achieve your goals, things you otherwise would not pay attention to. That's what the power of thought is. Plutarch said, what we achieve inwardly will change outer reality. And your thoughts are going to
Yes, yes, and yes. We have inventory at all of our stores.
Your subconscious. Reporting a toy, your subconscious is the storage point for every memory. It holds information that you use every day. It serves as a access memory. Thus, the subconscious can be seen as the source of dreams and automatic thoughts, the repository of memories, and the locus of implicit knowledge. It's where automatic guidelines for living are supplied to us. And if you don't feed your mind with success, it will rot with mediocrity. You